Hello and good morning to a vital session to discuss how social sciences can be used for practical purposes in wider society. My name's Gillian Tett. I'm been a journalist with the Financial Times for many years. I'm now Provost of King's College, Cambridge. And I also have a PhD in cultural anthropology myself, which used to be regarded by many people in the so-called real world as a pretty useless set of research arenas. However, I spent much of my life battling to show that anthropology in particular and social sciences in general can be absolutely vital for tackling many of the wicked problems we face today in the wider world, be that in government, be that in business, be that in the third sector, be that in the tech arena. And what we're going to be talking about today is a series of really important research that's been done to look at how and why social sciences can be so valid and relevant and what could be done to make them even more so. We're going to be starting with a presentation by Professor Melinda Mills, who's from Oxford University, who's going to be talking about what she has found from her own research and then widening it out to other speakers. And we're very keen indeed to take questions from anyone watching. This really is intended to be interactive. So do start posting your questions in the chat function, and we look forward to hopefully a very lively and illuminating debate. Over to you, Professor Mills.
Thank you very much, Gillian. So I'm excited to be here today to present a report that we've together as a group of researchers at the Leverhulme Centre for Demographic Science. We have produced this. And I'd like to specifically note Sander Wagner, Charles Rahal, Doug Leisure, and many of the researchers that were involved, and you can find the information about them on the report. So we were asked from the British Academy and the Academy of Social Sciences to sort of look at the REF study. So this is an incredible thing that happens every few years in the UK, that we stand back and we look and we think, okay, what is the research that's been conducted at universities, this high quality research? What's actually been the impact of this research? This gives us an opportunity to pause and look at all of these different impact case studies. They're around a few pages each, and they all have this incredible amount of evidence. So we were able to look at and try to bring out some of what are the stories, what are the successes, what are the cumulative effects of SHAPE, so the social sciences, humanities disciplines. And just to tell you about our methodological and analytical approach, I think it's quite important to understand what we did. So it's a combination, it's multimodal, it's mixed research, where we used generative AI techniques and specifically large language modeling, because the REF is just a huge textual corpus of data. So we did topic modeling and analysis and probabilistic assignments into around 80 different categories. But then we scrutinized those with qualitative research and tried to examine, well, did the AI model, did this algorithm work? And we can talk about it in the Q&A, and in some cases, it definitely did not. So we can discuss that. So we did a really deep sort of qualitative look at this as well, too. We also linked it with an unprecedented amount of environmental data and bibliometric data, so from the Dimensions database, to try to look at the citations, coverage, interdisciplinarity of research. We did around 48 qualitative interviews with case study authors and REF panelists, and as well a survey. And it was very interesting. From these 84 different topics, we were able to cluster and categorize them into 10 grand impact themes. So the arts, language and design, archaeology, exhibits and galleries, education, teaching and skills was a very large component. Employment, business, economics and management was a huge return to the impact case studies. Prisons, crime and exclusion, governance and law. Remember, this is the REF 2021, so around the time where there was a lot of discussion on Brexit. So there's a lot of different case studies in that area. Family and gender, but we also looked at health and well-being and sustainability and infrastructure. And I'd really like to focus, and draw your attention to those last two. So SHAPE disciplines, so social sciences and humanities, really has a lot to offer outside of SHAPE disciplines. And that was one of our main findings as well, too. They infiltrate the medical sciences, engineering, humanities, technology, infrastructure, and a lot of net zero and environmental and digital case studies. So don't worry, I will zoom in on this. But part of the graphics that we looked at, this is a heat map plot. So it shows the darker it gets, or the more yellow it gets, it shows the concentration of impact case studies. And these are our 84 different topics that you can explore on our dashboard. I'll talk about that at the end. By unit of assessment. So remember, there were these 34 different units of assessment where the REF impact case studies and research was evaluated. And then this shows the distribution across the 10 impact themes. So just to show you, just to pull out one example, this is the example of the topic, archaeology in place. And you can see, as expected, it's in the panel where we have, archaeology, architecture, geography, environmental studies, but it's also in the social sciences as well. So that shows the social sciences, but it's also in the humanities panel as well, too. So we can see huge overlap with area studies, English language literature, history, and this just shows the sort of interdisciplinarity and the cross-fertilization across some of these different topics. And we were very excited for each of the 10 different topics. We tried to visualize it and really bring out what are the main things and how can we visually understand what's happening in social science and humanities research impact. So you can look at things such as how does it distribute across the topic? I'll show you that in a moment. What are the sort of main words? When did this impact occur of the underlying research? So there were some changes in the rules of when the impact could occur. And some people applied for an extension of a previous REF impact case study. So what were the geographies? Who actually was impacted? What were the main topics that people were focused on? Who funded this as well? And what was the interdisciplinarity? And, what was the spread of male and female authors in the underpinning research? So to just pull out one of the 10 grand themes, this is education, teaching, and skills, just to give you an idea. So you can see, as we would expect, most of it has been returned to the education unit of assessment. But there's also this huge cross-disciplinarity working with the humanities and languages and linguistics, English language literature, a lot of really core interventions in psychology, psychiatry, and neuroscience about how students learn, a lot of technologies, a lot of online platforms, patents, many different things that perhaps at first glance you might not think it would be happening with social sciences and humanities. And just to give you a taste again from the education, skills, and training grand theme, you can see, we'll talk about funding in a moment. It's powered by certain funders such as the ESRC, AHRC, European Commission, but it's this huge wealth of interdisciplinarity of the underpinning research. So something like education, it touches history, biology, mathematics, economics, religion. All of these different areas are involved to produce the kind of research that we see. And just to give you an example, I would really like to highlight, one of the exciting and really clear findings was how shape research impacts domains outside of the social sciences and humanities. So this is the health and well-being theme that we were able to pull out. And it's really clear. I mean, look at this. You can see it's in heart, lung disease, global health. And there was a huge amount of technology, sport, health, fitness, where you desperately need a behavioral approach. And you could see that these technologies, these patents, these interventions, from music therapy to dance therapy, to interventions to elite sports athletes. I mean, it was really a very strong aspect here that we pulled out of these case studies. And then turning to the environment, you can look at this in more detail in the study. But we looked at, one of the things in the REF studies was to look at the environment. And I think, one of the takeaways you can take from this is that you can see that the larger departments fared better. And that would make sense when you think about the REF rules and you need 15 people for each case study. So the smaller units just had fewer people to draw from. I think it was really exciting, but very challenging to look at the geography of the impact. So who were the beneficiaries? The main takeaway here is it's the UK. So UK money spent in UK universities on UK research, you're definitely getting a strong value in that sense. But also there's a huge impact and it really differs by topic. So there's some areas where you can see real impact in sub-Saharan Africa, some areas where there's very strong links with Europe and with Germany, and as well, there's very strong links with the USA as well. You can explore this on our database. And I would just like to say the challenges of doing this, because some people just say global impact or Middle East or something like that. So our coders manually went through these data sets, and we've cleaned the data set and made it openly available for all of you to use. The key funders was a really striking aspect. So this is by research, the underpinning research. So remember, people had to say what is the research that led to this impact that we found. So the top line is research and the bottom line is impact case studies. And remember, it's probably a conservative estimate because it's only people that mentioned research. And that mentioned research funders. And then there's a huge variety of research that didn't mention a funder. So that means that this research and this impact is core funded by universities. So the universities are paying for this without external funding. And I think we can't emphasize that enough. So if you look at UOA4, remember that's psychology, psychiatry, and neuroscience, we see what we would anticipate: Department of Health, Social Care, MRC, NIHR, Wellcome Trust. These are your main funders for research and impact. But panel C and panel D show without the ESRC and AHRC, I mean, these are the main engines and drivers of research and impact. But also the European Commission, we know that we are punch well above our weight in social sciences and humanities and getting a lot of grants to support much of this valuable research. But also the Leverhulme Trust, Nuffield Foundation, and others were important funders. So just moving towards the end of my presentation, another really exciting thing we found, and it was really clear, you could look at it from the underpinning research of who cites who, but also in terms of the language used in the case studies. This research is highly interdisciplinary, and the really high impact case studies, they were the ones that reached across disciplinary boundaries and really did exciting, innovative things. The humanities, you can see pockets of disciplines working together. So history and language, for example, and the social sciences was much more spread across different disciplines. We looked at it in multiple different ways, and you can explore it in our report. It was very clear that the social sciences and the medical sciences have very strong links in terms of their research and their impact, but also with the physical sciences and the humanities. The humanities had very strong links with the social sciences, but in many cases also the medical sciences. If we look at the female versus male authors of the impact case studies, the line across shows 50% of female authors, and then it's divided, the blue is STEM and the orange is SHAPE researchers. And then it's divided by these different unit of assessment numbers. I've just marked some of the names so you could see it. So we have the usual suspects of low amounts of females in physics, computer science, engineering, economics, econometrics, archaeology, and sports science. But then you can see that you have some areas where we had more women submitting ref and writing ref case studies in health professions of nursing, dentistry, in psychology, and as well in social policy, sociology, law, and the modern languages and English language. And then just before I conclude, I would just really like to emphasize that we would love for you to explore our results. And something that we're excited about is that we produced an interactive dashboard. So you'll be able to look at all of these 84 different case studies, and you can explore the geography. You can see, okay, has there been impact done in that area? In which way? You can click through to the case study and explore these different aspects. Just like everything, it's been hard. It's very interdisciplinary. So you might see that one case study is categorized under environment, but it's very interdisciplinary. And what we've done is our best to be very transparent about what we're doing. And so when you explore it, we would love your feedback. But we also note the limitations of having to categorize a huge 4,000 different case studies into 84 distinct topics. So just to conclude, I think, you know, the takeaway from this report has been it's a pleasure to work on, and it's very exciting to see just the amount of impact that has happened from the social sciences and humanities generated by university research. It's huge. It's multifaceted. We note as a very small aspect in the report that you know, in the future ref, you might want to think about a different impact taxonomy. So they had categories such as, is the impact social, economic, cultural, technological? And, you know, just as an aside, definitely not the main takeaway from this report, is that you might want to think about a more granular categorization of the results, or just using a technique such as ours to classify them rather than pre-classifying them into very broad categories. I think, you know, another takeaway is it's not just about social policy or changing economics or galleries or exhibits or the arts or the performing arts. It's a lot about technology. And we were really struck by the amount of interaction with industry and industrial interventions. Very interdisciplinary, high research concentrated on UK and global impact. And it was really striking that even though the ESRC, AHRC received such a small budget from the UKRI, how much they've contributed to well-being and public impact across the UK. And just to caveat, to conclude, remember that this is research submitted from universities to the ref, and then those that were selected for case studies. This doesn't cover all of the impact of social sciences and humanities research. It's just a tip of the iceberg. It's a beautiful tip, and we can see, and it gives many different examples, but there is a lot more impact happening beyond what we were just able to show. And we didn't scrutinize the procedural aspects of the ref. That wasn't the aim of this project. And I think you'll see that, you know, many things straddle across multiple topics, and it's hard to categorize something so complex. So I'll turn it back to Gillian, and thank you. And I hope that you're able to look and explore our report and dashboard. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much indeed, Melinda. That was fascinating. I found the interdisciplinary points particularly interesting, not just because it's sort of flavor of the month, but also because it does show the degree to which one can be innovative within social sciences as well. I'd like to now turn to Rita Gardner, who is the Chief Executive of the Academy of Social Sciences and geographer, to talk about her perceptions of what is going on right now and call to arms. I'm delighted to see that there are already questions coming in. I actually misspoke earlier and said to put the questions in the chat. In fact, the questions should go to the Q&A function. But in the chat, if you do look at that, there is actually a link to the report and the research and the data dashboard, which you can scrutinize yourself. So over to you, Rita.
Good morning, everybody. I'm delighted to join this launch. And thank you, Gillian, for doing a brilliant job as chair, and Melinda for showcasing the report that we commissioned from you and your team. When I say we, it's the British Academy and the Academy of Social Sciences. And I'd like to congratulate you on a fantastic report. Above all, this report could not be more timely as we enter an election year. It leaves no one in any doubt about the immense breadth and scale of impact that emanates from research in the social sciences, arts and humanities, i.e. in the SHAPE disciplines. And I'm going to make 3 points, 3 aspects relating to the report that resonate most with me and that tie in across to the 5 key messages for policy makers emanating from this report. And I think you've also, all of you, got access to that key messages document, and do have a look at it after the seminar. So those 5 key messages are: SHAPE research is bolstering UK expertise and strength in areas of competitive advantage. SHAPE research is tackling societal challenges. SHAPE research helps to understand people and empower communities here in the UK. SHAPE research spreads beyond traditional boundaries to create impact. And SHAPE research is a smart investment, with impact providing good value for money. And I'm going to pick up on 3 of those very briefly with 1 or 2 examples. So first, the report and the case studies highlight the ways in which SHAPE research is tackling societal challenges. There's a brilliant story to tell across SHAPE as a whole, but it's no surprise to see the social sciences particularly shine in this area. My apologies, I have a social science background. I sit at the head of the Academy for Social Sciences, so I will concentrate more on the social sciences in my comments. So, for example, there was substantial impact in relation to contemporary economic challenges in the UK and around the world. The subcategory, as an example of business, entrepreneurialism and management, which is one of those topic areas and themes that Melinda was talking about, included more than 100 case studies spread across all 4 nations of the UK, with research improving productivity and economic growth, often at a local level, working with SMEs, such as improving training, providing guidance in ways that boost performance and the regional economy. This sort of impact is indicative of a social science sector that is quietly delivering value for UK PLC. Indeed, a report which came out last year from RAND emphasised the societal contribution of social sciences to government, to communities, to policymakers and practitioners, and that too was based on the wider set of impact case studies across all sectors. And those messages are echoed by the report we're launching today, but we go a little bit further. In addition, for example, we highlight social sciences and the arts and humanities' important contributions to the economy, the environment, public, children and schools, and to NGOs. The second and related point is that impact, as we've heard from Melinda, so often spreads beyond traditional disciplinary boundaries. Again, there are examples here from across SHAPE, but if you'll allow me to focus on the social sciences for a moment, there were many compelling examples of social science insights across different disciplines in the social sciences and complementing STEM research. Much of that interdisciplinary is, of course, within sectors or between social sciences and humanities, as well as across to the STEM discipline areas. So in terms of the social science and STEM cross-disciplinary research, we see, for example, within the healthcare sector, many areas, including mental health and aging, amongst many others, figuring. But there are also excellent case study examples of physical science, behavioural, legal, geographical planning research coming together to play a transformative role within sustainability and infrastructure. One example I particularly like here is research that has greatly enhanced satellite technology and its applications, specifically the European Space Agency and the European Commission's capability to monitor global vegetation from space in near real time. Why does this matter? Well, the innovative and robust data products have generated major benefits for agriculture and environmental service providers, including timely and targeted response to poor harvests and plant disease outbreaks, thus helping to underpin food security. Their work has also contributed to quality assurance of numerous operational applications, ranging from monitoring biodiversity to drought surveillance. So of huge benefit to governments and the private sector and to researchers. The Academy of Social Science campaign released a report last week that emphasised too the symbiosis between STEM and social science research within a thriving research and innovation ecosystem. Today's report is further evidence for that, and we encourage policymakers and funders to nurture cross-disciplinary research further in the years ahead, while of course continuing to sustain sector-based research funding. UKRI is already doing good work in this interdisciplinary space, but undoubtedly more could be done, particularly, for example, on new technologies such as AI, where policy will need to lean on social science insights so that technologies can be adapted in ways that secure public confidence and protection. And my last point, the final finding I also want to mention, concerns SHAPE research as a smart investment, providing value for money. Well, while we're not in a position to quantify this, what we can say assuredly is that disciplines with relatively modest levels of research funding as indeed all those in the social sciences, arts and humanities do have, consistently deliver high numbers and high quality of impact case studies. For social sciences, it's over a third of the total number of impact case studies submitted, with, as Melinda has said, ESRC and AHRC as the major funders of the research underpinning these case studies, but many others too, including a stunning contribution from the British Academy. Together, as Melinda has pointed out, ESRC and AHRC receive under 4% of total UKRI funding. That's in the report. And at a time when public finances are heavily squeezed, SHAPE research is, I would argue, going above and beyond to benefit the society, economy, and people. And that's a message we want to send loud and clear. So what we need in the years ahead is to have a clearer sense of how the research pipeline can continue to deliver what's needed for these areas, be appropriately funded to do so, and arguably find better ways of sharing and amplifying innovation and its impact to extend the benefits. The Department for Science, Innovation and Technology has articulated a vision for STEM through their science and technology framework. We now need to be having similar set of conversations for the social sciences, the arts and the humanities, and let's hope they can happen. I finally end by thanking Melinda and her team again, and colleagues at the British Academy, for a productive and enjoyable three-way collaboration that has not only given the Academy of Social Sciences and the British Academy resources for our respective advocacy work, but it's also given the enhanced data and the tools in the dashboard to the wider community for the benefit of SHAPE disciplines. Thank you. I'm going to hand back to Gillian.
Well, thank you very much indeed for that very thoughtful presentation, which certainly underlines a key point, which is that after all the focus and endless obsession with STEM, it's time to find ways to champion the social sciences, arts and humanities more effectively. And certainly having the data-driven approach is very, very powerful here. We're going to hear now from Simon Swain, who is, or Professor Swain, who is from Warwick, a classicist. He's also, in this case, most importantly, speaking as Vice President for Research and Higher Education Policy at the British Academy. Over to you, Professor Swain.
Thank you very much, Gillian. It's wonderful to be here, and I know that very many people are on this call, so that's absolutely terrific. As Gillian said, I come from a small corner of humanities, so perhaps I bring a slightly different perspective to this. And when I'm allowed, I still get around to doing academic work as well, so that's very important too. Now, years ago, when Impact first came in, people who are my age now said you won't like it. The truth was rather different, of course, because younger people and people in middle career in those days really wanted to make a difference. And they wanted it to be seen and to be understood widely. And they wanted to communicate not only with the general public, but also with funders, what we do and what the value of it is. So that's why this report is particularly important to me. Now, I really want to thank Rita and colleagues at the Academy of Social Sciences. It's been wonderful to work with you on this. And I want to thank my colleague at the Academy, Ram Prasad, who's at the University of Lancaster, for chairing the steering group. I also want to thank, sitting next to me very quietly, Conor McKenzie from the higher education team. But above all, Melinda, I want to thank you for producing a very beautiful report. Now, what I mean by that is that it's very easy to understand, and it demonstrates the key messages. It's full of sense, and it's logical, and it communicates the right messages, the messages which Rita has just talked about so well, to academics, to funders, to the general public. Melinda, in your slides, you had that wonderful heat map. And for me, if you look at humanities areas, or social sciences areas, you find we've had impact in places where we didn't know we had impact. That means that actually job done by this report. So it's very, very important for all of you to go and read the report. I think before you look at the dashboard, which again is full of information, what we want you to do with all this wonderful visual material is to go and use it. Take it, use it, use it within your universities and your own organizations to say that what we do in the humanities and social sciences is valuable, it makes a difference, it contributes to the UK economy, to well-being across this nation and internationally. It has very important messages, which you touched on a little bit, Melinda, about problems for smaller units. So I'm just thinking now of our wonderful colleagues I know are on this call from Research England. You might like to think about the effort which has to go in to impact case studies. Of course, we academics who do them know it's all worthwhile, but we look forward to some of those proposals, I think, in the next ref, which makes things perhaps a little bit easier. What sort of other things might I want to point out? Well, let me tell you one example just before I finish of a case study which really touched me. It's page 64 of the report. Just one example. And it's music making for locked-in people who suffered strokes and can only communicate through their eyes. It's just a wonderful example of how a solid humanities discipline can really make a difference to health, well-being and enjoyment of life, even for people in that terrible condition. There are many, many more examples here, which Melinda lists. It's packed with information. I think both you and Rita said it's the tip of the iceberg. Well, just think, academics, funders, other colleagues on this call, what that actually means, the actual width and breadth of the research which we do and the difference which it makes, keeping the UK smart. That's one way of putting it, as Rita said, and the funding which goes into these all this work is clearly extremely good value for money. But above all, this report is just interesting. It shows you what we do, how well we do it, working with everybody, funders, universities, etc., etc. It all adds up to something which I think is a must read. So thank you very much. I know we've got some questions to come from the chat. I'm going to hand back now to Gillian.
Thank you very much indeed. And I do find that story fascinating about locked-in music. Another thing I'll mention, simply because I spent time, a lot of time in America, and I have a daughter at a liberal arts college, is that, what a number of the liberal arts colleges in America are doing is now not trying to show the wider social impact of their research, but also keep track of what happens to their graduates and all the ways that they find ways to use their skills in practical careers. And that's been very helpful at a time when people are trying to defend the liberal arts model in America. So maybe there's some ideas to learn from there as well. But anyway, we've got a number of questions coming through. As Simon just said, we've got a lot of people on the call who are very engaged in these issues. I'm going to start with a question first to Rita, which is this. Which findings from this report did you personally find most interesting or surprising? Maybe Rita and Melinda can reply to that.
I think what I found the most both interesting and surprising in the extent to which it was developed was the heat map that's already been referred to. And I don't have to hand, Melinda can tell us on which page it is on the report, but it's the heat map that shows just the many and varied ways that the disciplines across the shape area contribute to those 10 key themes that Melinda's research, the 10 grand impact themes that Melinda's research pulled out. So the degree of multidisciplinary and cross-disciplinary input into those areas and cross-disciplinary collaboration, I thought was quite mind-blowing. And you can see that across the social sciences and across the humanities. That diagram, above anything else, absolutely brings out the importance of the arts, humanities and social sciences to me.
What about you, Melinda?
Yeah, just to give credit where credit is due, that diagram was masterminded by Charles Rahal in our team, who's just an amazing person, and he's able to bring out these visualizations. And I think we shouldn't, it's on page 13 and it's figure 2 for those of you who would like to look at the report. And it's amazing what Charlie Rahal has been able to do in terms of the visualizations. and Sander Wagner and Ellis Spears and others who categorized and scrutinized these things as well too. So I think for me, the main thing, in addition to what Rita said, I found some surprises, if I have to be honest with you. I found the fact that the social sciences, arts, and humanities are so involved in quite technical research and engineering and environmental sustainability, net zero, digital applications, and AI. And just the huge wealth of data that Simon also highlighted in health interventions. For me, that was really interesting. And there's a lot of patents and interventions and technologies that could not exist without the social sciences. So the fact that that became two of the big themes for me was something that I have to admit I wasn't expecting.
Right. I should actually ask Simon as well. Simon, do you have any thoughts from your point of view about what you found
Yes,
surprising?
thank you very much, Gillian. Also, I already mentioned the music case study, but there's one other which perhaps I'll pick out. And page 42, work with the Low Pay Commission, which ended up raising the pay for about 1 million workers in this country. That's terrific, isn't it? It's a vast number of people who have been benefited by research in our subject areas. And there are some other big figures in there as well for impact, not just in this country. Melinda, you also mentioned the one in Southern and Southeastern Africa, working with people with HIV to improve, I think you said, health outputs, health improvement for 2 million adolescents. I mean, that's amazing, isn't it? These are the kind of things which we need to highlight because they're very good for this country. They make this country better and its role in the world much easier, I think. So terrific stuff.
Yeah. No, those are great stories. And I say, as someone who's spent much of my life, in storytelling, having tangible stories and examples are absolutely critical for trying to communicate this right now, along with the data on the dashboard. And I should mention, by the way, I think they put a message in the chat that anyone who wants to find the dashboard, we keep talking about the heat map. It's figure 2 on page 13 of the full report. So do have a look at it there. I'd like to now turn to a question which I think is probably good for Rita to address, which is the interdisciplinarity of social sciences. It's one of the themes that's come through, the question goes, other work by the Academy of Social Sciences, and it suggests that has a lot of impact. So I'm curious, have you been able to look at this aspect by the funder to see whether there are some funders that are promoting this kind of work, or whether it's actually coming more out of the universities, what's actually driving it?
Okay, I think that's where the dashboard actually will be a huge resource for the whole community coming out of this project. So the short answer is we haven't been able to look at that level of detail as yet, but now that we've got access to the dashboard, us and anyone else in the community can interrogate that to find answers to just those sorts of questions. So we can look at, it's possible there to cut the content of the dashboard by a funder to then enable through that the interrogation of the dashboard to select out those case studies that have been involved with those funders. So the dashboard opens a window for those who want to explore further with this data. So the short answer is we don't have the data to answer the question that's been posed. It's a brilliant question. It'd be great to follow up on that. And the dashboard starts to provide the sorts of tools we need to be able to collate and access that information.
Right. Melinda, you probably got a view on this as well. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think as Rita noted, you can use the dashboard, but I think another exciting part about our project is that we make all of our code open source, and you actually our enhanced database you can download, so people will be able to do further, examinations of the research. And I think by linking it with the bibliometric data to see what underpinning research there is, we probably could get further into answering, this interdisciplinarity and which funders are there. But remember, it's about reporting too. So there are some inconsistencies in who reports research or not. And QR-funded university research is often underreported or not reported at all. And I think that's something to note. And I think someone else, David James, was talking about this, the SDGs, the development goals. I think that would be another fascinating thing that you could actually explore by looking at, the sustainable development goals within the textual corpus, using our database to explore. And Gillian, if you don't mind, can I take this opportunity to address another question about our topic modeling and clustering? Yeah, just to talk about that. So this relates to the fact.
Should I read out what the question is before
Sure,
you jump
please.
the answer? Just because the question you're going to address, which you've seen, is that basically, have you compared the topic model from your analysis of the shape disciplines with the topic model on the whole case study set published last year? I mean, are the topics similar or are there significant differences? That's the question. So, Melinda, give us your spontaneous answer.
I think it's a really great question, and I'm grateful to receive it. So, the report was last year by RAND, and they looked at all of the different ref case studies. So, of course, there'll be differences because we looked at UOA4, psychology, psychiatry, neuroscience, panel C and D, so the social sciences, arts, and humanities. So that will be your first difference. They will cluster differently. But I think, we differed from that report in several key ways, and I think it's important to know those differences. So we looked at just a more narrow group, so you'll have probably a richer categorization. We are going to replicate it, though, to see, so we will be able to answer that quite soon because we are replicating it as well. I think a big difference is the fact that when we did our AI models and our large language models, we used BERT models and BERT classifications. And I won't go too dark side on you here, but we made all of our research open source, so you can just look at it. We used a more recent model, but I think the key here is that those models did not classify things in all cases. So we had to manually, Sander Wagner and Alice Spears, we had multiple coders. They had to reclassify topics. So large language models don't understand the meaning of words. So something like sustainability, financial sustainability, or environmental sustainability, they'll classify those in the same way, so they won't understand the meaning, or they'll classify things in forensics and cosmetic surgery together, which is another example. So they don't understand that. So you have to have a human in the loop. And I think we're scientists, so we have to be transparent. We have open source code. We can show everything. You can replicate things. And I think the other report was from a consultancy, so we weren't able to see the black box of what they did as well. So I think that's a big difference. But also we use much more external sources, so the Dimensions database, and we supplemented our material. But I think the big difference then is that it was qualitative as well too. So we took a big effort to scrutinize those AI models and found out that they, in about 1/3 of the cases didn't stand up because they don't understand meaning, which is obvious. But this is when social science, arts, humanities researchers approach AI. That's the first thing we do, is we don't trust them.
Well, one thing I often argue is that artificial intelligence, that type of AI, needs anthropology intelligence, a second type of AI, to create the third type of intelligence, which is augmented intelligence, which is the right type of AI. So that's a case in point. But we have a question from Fiona McPherson, which maybe Melinda can address, or anybody else, which is, does the proportion of women leading impact case studies match or mismatch the proportion of women in their subjects and or the proportion of senior women professors in their subjects? And she asks because she points out the representation of women in philosophy is quite poor.
That's an excellent question, and it's actually something that we thought of. We didn't supplement the data set with looking at actually what the UOA, the impact of the impact assessment, these 34 different UOAs, they map in some ways to disciplines and in some cases not. But it would be really interesting to match this to what we know from universities, from university reporting, and from other different reporting, how those map. Just from some of the work we tried to do is definitely they are a reflection. So philosophy, physics, engineering, computer science, econometrics, and things, you'll definitely probably find a similar mapping of a lower representation of women in those fields. And then you'll find a higher representation of female staff in topics like sociology, social policy, English language and literature. But what you might find that we haven't scrutinized, but our data is available, you can you can look at it, or we can look at it later. You can contact us. It would be interesting to see if women actually are not overrepresented in the case studies. So are the women doing more of the outreach in comparison to the representation of staff at the university? That we don't know, and that would be a fascinating thing. Fund us if your funder's on the call and we can look at it, or use our data set if your researcher's on the call and answer that question. It's a great one.
Right. That's great. Anyone else want to jump in there? Rita or?
Yes, good to hear from Fiona. It's a very important question, and do have a look at the report and see what Melinda's team say about the way in which they've been able to look at the gender issue. Something Research England colleagues also might like to think about. I think we'd all like more diversity information around the case studies. It wasn't easy to do it. And perhaps I can just make a slightly wider point, which is that if you do have suggestions about future work, because I think I speak for Rita too, we're very keen to not let this lie, but we're very keen to put out further explainers and policy briefings, and maybe to commission some more work around this area. If you've got suggestions, the things that matter to you, please send them to us, get in touch, and we'll see what we can do.
Right. There's another more specific question from Anne Boddington asking, is it social sciences and humanities, or arts, social sciences and arts? What are we doing with language? Which is exactly the question you expect from a group of people who are used to thinking deeply about language and social patterns.
Well, languages are part of humanities, and get in touch with us if you want to know, or look on our website, the British Academy. The extraordinary amount of work which the Academy does on languages, that's very important. But the arts and performing arts are also very important to us, and they're all wrapped up in that wonderful word, shape.
Right. Another question going back to the SDGs, and perhaps maybe we can talk a bit more about this, is this likely to indicate any specific directions for future research in relation to the SDGs?
If I can just answer that, I think there's so many you could do this for SDGs, you could do it for net zero, you could do it for health and tackling different issues in housing and infrastructure. There's so many different topics that you would be able to see. So you could look at it and see, okay, well, there's been an impact case study in Wales in this topic, or there's been a case study with this intervention in this area. You'll be able to pull them out now. You'll be able to read them, as Simon said from our report, but you'll be able to actually pull them out and say, okay, well, where was this application? Oh, okay, there was one done in Africa, there was one done in North America, and you can look and try to see those aspects. But I think, there's so many different ways that you can see that this kind of research, it's sustainable development goals, it's educational interventions, it's so many different things. And I think the dashboard will allow you, if you're interested in a certain topic, you can actually find it and see where it had the impact. But I would love to explore that further.
Right. And perhaps could I just come in there, Gillian, and add that, of course, many of the case studies can fit into several different of the grand theme categories. And so if you take the Sustainable Development Goals, there's 17 Sustainable Development Goals, a majority of which actually sit across the social science, the sort of shape area. And so you will not just find sustainable development research and impact being reported under that grand theme of sustainable development, but there will be other grand themes that also have topics within them that make some contribution to sustainability and to sustainable development. So it's worth exploring the wider database as well.
Right. And I guess the other question I have, which is my own personal question, is how does this compare in an international perspective? Are you aware of, other countries that have done similar kind of exercises?
Yes, there's been other countries that have done some exercises, in Australia and some areas in Asia as well too. But I have to say that this is probably, when we looked at it, one of the largest sort of impact assessments because of the way that it's done in the UK. So it can potentially be a world leader in this area. It's examined in multiple different ways in other countries. So I think other countries, I've sat on funding boards in other countries as well too. They're looking to the UK as sort of a leader in this area. And how do we assess impact? It's really hard to do, but this gives us some first steps about, you know, some of the positive things that we can pull out.
Right, right. Well, I think we've addressed all the questions that the audience asked, which is fantastic. It shows how efficient and focused everyone's been. So perhaps it remains for me to say, you know, last of all, if the three of you would like to offer some last thoughts about, you know, what the next steps are, maybe I can start with you, Melinda, and then have Rita and then Simon.
Sure. I think the next steps are, I would just ask everyone, please enjoy our report, interact with us, explore this. And I think that this shows how healthy the social science, arts, and humanities and shape disciplines are. And you know, one thing, just continue doing what you're doing, but maybe shout a little bit more about it, because there's a lot out there that we just haven't uncovered yet.
Hi, I would say three things. They're broadly similar to Melinda. Use the report, share the report, particularly share it with those in networks that you have, whether they're in academic networks, policy networks, education networks, public networks. Share the report and share some of the key findings, or pick up one or two of the case studies that you go, gosh, I didn't know that, or wow, that's amazing, and share those stories. So Gillian, I agree with you, it comes back to those stories. And the third thing is to champion it, to celebrate it. This is a time actually where we should be celebrating a huge and impressive range of impact across the shape disciplines. Let's all celebrate it and talk about it.
Absolutely. Simon.
Yes, yes to all those things. Those of you who are producing the academic work and the impacts which Melinda's report has captured, be proud of what you've done. It's amazing and incredible stuff. What's good about the report is that it captures it, explores it, presents it in such a very clear way. Go forth, use this report, cut and slice the data, use it for your own purposes. Let's all keep working together to spread the word and to make sure that what we do is not undervalued or underfunded. Thank you.
Right, right. Well, listen, I say a very big thank you to all of you. As I said at the beginning, I feel strongly about this myself. When I went into financial journalism, having done my PhD in anthropology, I sometimes used to joke that I felt like I was in the closet as an anthropologist, because when I spoke to grown-up CEOs and business leaders and policymakers, they were all pretty scornful about anthropology and the value of social sciences. It felt like the only disciplines that really mattered were the quantitative ones in the hard sciences. The 2008 financial crisis, in my case, changed the perception dramatically and underscored to everybody that finance is not just about numbers, it's about people and culture and incentives and language and things like that. And I think there was a shift in perception, and I think that has been mounting in recent years as the tech sector has come under challenge and threat, and of course, as we're now grappling with the impact of AI and so many other wicked problems around the world. So I would very strongly echo the call for people to shout out about the social sciences and their value, both in society and to individuals and their own careers, because it's something I feel very strongly about. So in that context, I applaud the authors of the report. I applaud those who've been discussing it and promoting it and celebrating it, as they say. And thank you to all of you in taking part today, and go forth and champion. So thank you all very much indeed.